All right, in the first video, we talked all about how to help somebody have a great experience before the service. In this one, we're going to talk about the service itself. What can you do on Sunday during the church service to help guests have a good experience to ensure a great follow-up experience? And so I'm going to give you lots of ideas, lots of strategies, lots of action steps in here today. And so the service is really important because effective follow-up begins with preparing for a guest. If you want to follow up with a guest after their visit and help them get connected, get assimilated, get in a group, follow Jesus, become a better Christian, share their faith. If you want to do all those things, right, get somebody connected into the life of the church, we've actually got to back it up and prepare really well. Effective follow-up continues, so it begins with preparation, but it continues with a service that makes sense to guests. And so let me just kind of say this as a warning as we get going on this. You might not be as guest friendly as you think you are. There's a big difference between churches who are friendly to each other and churches who are intentionally friendly to new people. Being friendly to each other, right? People that come every week, see each other. Hey, how's it going? That family feeling. We want churches to feel like family. Well, some families are really dysfunctional, right? And some families are really, not open to outsiders coming into the family. It's us and nobody else, right? And so friendly to each other and intentionally friendly to new people are very different things. And just like we said before, it is our culture that's going to determine our actions, but our actions are going to reinforce our culture. And so as we get going on this, we talk about follow-up, we want to have a kind of culture where guests are welcome and where guests are valued and where new people are welcomed in, not just friendly amongst the people who are there all the time, but but a church, a culture who's welcoming to new people. And so we're going to talk about the service today, and we're going to talk about 3 things, some areas that you can really win with guests in your service. And the first is this, your handout. Most bulletins and most handouts contain way too much information. Way too much information. So your opportunity to connect with a guest actually begins with whatever you put in their hands. And so most of the handouts that I've seen, and I'm like a collector of these things, most of them contain way too much information. I went to a church one time, I visited a church one time, and they gave me a handout, they gave me a bulletin when I came in. We sat down, service was getting started. I start, reading what's going on. And literally inside the handout, it told me, it said, here's 10 ways to get connected at such and such church. And it was all these different options for me. And guess which one I did? None. Because too many options actually lead people to take no action. Most bulletins or handouts contain too much information. So what's truly important in the church, it actually gets lost among all the announcements. So here's the better plan. Instead of loading up your bulletin or your handout with all the announcements and all the information, make sure to highlight one simple step that new people can take. Instead of talking about the 5 ways or the 10 ways to get connected, talk about the best way to get connected. Instead of describing 5 upcoming programs or activities, take time and fully explain the benefits of the most important one. Now, this is going to require honesty. It's going to require focus because, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, all church programs and all church ministries are not created equal. They might all be valuable, but they're not all equal in the minds of guests. There are things that your church does that are more appropriate to new people. And there are things that your church does, programs and ministries you have, that are more appropriate to members. And so your handout and bulletin needs to actually highlight the things that are most important to guests and new people. If you try to put every program and every ministry on equal ground, it's going to result in this myriad of programs and options that's going to lack any real effectiveness. Now, we're going to talk about this more in a whole module on communicating, like communicating into the church, because I know one of the questions you have is if we don't put it in the bulletin, how are people going to know? Okay, my argument is that the more stuff you put in the bulletin, the less people know. Because when your bulletin or handout is just stuffed and crowded and inserted and all this kind of stuff, people don't listen to any of it. So more is not better. Less is better. Less is more, you've heard people say, but less is actually not just more, but less is better. And so when you're creating a bulletin or a handout, here's 2 things that'll make a huge difference. And so all your church programs are not equal, so we don't need to give them all fair treatment. That's okay. We can get rid of that. But here's 2 things that you can do. These are huge principles. If you just get these, this will be worth your price of your day right here. Number 1, make it about them. This is by far the number 1 mistake that I see churches make with their bulletins and handouts. Bulletins and handouts are typically all about the church. when instead it needs to be all about the reader. Now, I know you hear this and go, well, what's the difference? I don't understand the difference. Of course, our bulletin's supposed to be about us. I got to talk about our programs. I got to talk about our ministries. We need to tell people about what we've got going on. You do need to do that. However, your church handout and bulletin does not need to be all about you. It needs to be all about them. So let me just unpack this a little more. Think about what's going on in people's lives and write your bulletin or your handout with your audience in mind, because it is about them. It is not about you. You've got to talk about the benefits of something. And we're going to talk more about this in the communication module. But you've got to talk about the benefits of the children's ministry, not the children's ministry. You've got to talk about the benefits to small groups, not just the kickoff day of small groups. You've got to talk about what they want to talk about. Why should someone participate, not just the location of the sign-up table. You've got to make it about them. And so in all your language, in all your communication, all throughout the handout, it needs to be about people. And so you could simply look through this, read the announcement, read an announcement that you've set, and just ask the question, is this about us or is this about them? And so here's an announcement that's about us. Hey, we've got small groups kicking off next Sunday. There's a sign-up table out front. We've got 12 groups for you. We've got 12 different groups that you can get into. There's a flyer. You can sign up out in the lobby. Starts next Sunday. Sign up at the lobby. Typical announcement, right? Well, that's about us. We've got small groups. Here's where you get in. Here's it's about us. We've got groups, and look at them. Woohoo! That's great. How do you make that about them? You say this: you have the opportunity to connect with a group of friends who can journey with you through this next season of life. And brand new groups are getting kicked off. So everybody in the group will be new. And so everybody will be in the same boat. So the pressure's off. Everybody's new. And you can make some friends and get connected with a group of friends. And it starts next week. See, that's now about them. That's about me. And that's way more effective. And so make your bulletin about the people, not about the programs. Make your bulletin or handout about them, not about the ministries of the church. Again, youth camp. Let me give you another example. Youth camp is happening July 12th through the 16th. We're going to this place. It's this much money. This is the band. This is the speaker. The deadline to sign up is this. Typical announcement, right? We've all printed those things in our handouts. Well, that's about us. We've got youth camp. Here's our speaker. Here's our dates. Here's our deadline. Here's how much it costs. It's about us, and it's boring. Here's a better way to do it. Do you want your teenagers to make Christian friends who will help them make wise decisions throughout their high school career? If so, student camp is a great opportunity. Here's all the information. You see how that's about them? It's reaching them at a much different level. And this is actually very welcoming to guests, because we're talking about how to get guests connected. And guests aren't interested in the member class. They're not interested in taking the 4-week class about the vision and values and mission of the church. What they're interested in is a better life. The reason they came to church is because they realized something's missing. So make your communication about them. Here's another thing. Focus on the everyday ministries, not just your special events. Most church bulletins are all about what's going on now. But what most church bulletins should be about is about what happens all the time. If I'm a guest, I don't need to know what's going on now. I need to know what happens on a regular basis, because my regular programs and ministries as a pastor and as a leader, our regular programs and ministries have far more potential to impact people than the special events. But so many times the bulletin space, the handout space, even the announcement space in church gets bumped because there's something this Sunday that's going on. Well, what's going on this Sunday might not apply to a guest. So focus the majority of your bulletin and handout space on what's going on all the time. Do you have Sunday school all the time? Talk about that. Do you have kids ministry all the time? Talk about that. Do you have student ministry, service, or small groups that happen midweek? Talk about that. Talk about what happens all the time, not just about what happens one time. I promise you, a guest is more interested in what's available to them and their family all the time than on the ice cream social or the work day. So if you want to connect people in your church and follow up with people, you want to have a good follow-up process, start by talking about the regular, ongoing, and most important ways for people to get connected. Make it really, really clear. Another thing here is watch out for insider language. Now, I mentioned this in the first video when we were talking about names of programs and ministries, but in our bulletins, we make these mistakes all the time. We got to watch out for insider language that just doesn't make sense, right? You may have a ministry called The Vault, and in your bulletin, if you say, hey, The Vault meets Wednesday at 7 p.m., well, a guest has no idea what the heck The Vault is. It sounds crazy. The Mix. Come to The Mix at 7 on Tuesdays. It's a great opportunity to meet people. Well, that doesn't tell me anything about anything. If you're an insider, if you've been around the church for a while, you know what The Mix is. You know The Mix is for high school students. If you've been around for a while, you know what The Vault is. One of my favorite is Wambaland. Wambaland, that's the name of North Point's kids ministry. And I've seen so many churches copy the name Wambaland, and I bet they don't even know what Wambaland means. In fact, I hardly hear it talked about what Wambaland means. I drove by a church in another town, a church that wasn't even affiliated with North Point, and they put a big sign out front of their building. They rented a space, and they put a big sign that says Wambaland. Well, somebody driving by that will have no clue what Wambaland is. And so that's just insider language. Is there anything wrong with it? No. But it makes no sense without explanation. So when you're writing and when you're talking to people, this is part of that action creates culture thing. Use language that makes sense to guests in your handout. In anything you print, use language, benefit language, make it about them, make it about what's important, not what's urgent, and use language that connects with them that they understand. And so, you don't have to say, hey, Wambaland is at 11 o'clock. You could say, we've got a program for babies through fourth graders. That makes sense. I understand that. And then you could say, it's called Wambaland. I mean, you could say that, but you've got to watch out for that language. All right? So let me give you the second thing. So we've got our handout. Our handout needs to be friendly to guests. We need to make sure a guest, first-time guest, reads this handout and goes, cool, this was written for me. The next thing we could do is a welcome. And so in each church service, there should be a moment when somebody, it could be the pastor, it could be another staff member, it could be a volunteer, needs to come out on the stage or the platform or the pulpit or whatever, and they need to intentionally welcome guests and talk about a next step. Now, this is something you should do in every church service. And I don't care if there are 8 people there and they're all related to you, like they're all your cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts and grandparents and family. If your entire church is full of your family and you personally know the social security numbers of everybody in the room, somebody should still come out and welcome guests. Why? Because action creates culture. And you need to welcome guests every time. You say, well, if I do this every single week, aren't people going to get tired of it? Yes. Yes, they're going to get tired of it, but it's not for them. It's for the new people. It's the reason that every time I get on a Delta flight at Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson International Airport and fly somewhere to go work with the church, there's a reason that a guy or a girl or somebody comes out and says, hey, here's how to work a seatbelt. Here's where the exits are. Here's what's going to happen today. That speech is not for me. I've been on a plane before many times. That speech is because somebody there is there for the first time. And so you should have a welcome in your church service to intentionally welcome guests and talk about a next step. It is this is the first time probably that somebody comes out and speaks to a guest directly. It is a critical moment in the connection process. And so let me tell you a few things that should be in your welcome. First of all, specifically welcome guests. Intentionally speak to guests during this time. Now, your parking lot person may have done this. A greeter probably didn't do it. Somebody at Kids Check-In may have done it. But this is a time for somebody to stand up and say, hey, welcome to Cross Church. If you're here today for the first time, we are so glad that you're here. Speak to guests. Call them out directly. Don't make them stand up. Don't make everybody else stand up and have them sit down. Don't call them out individually, but collectively speak directly to people who are guests. If you are here today and this is your first time, and then extend a welcome. Let people know what to expect. Let people know where to go if they have questions. And again, if you know for a fact there are no guests there, I would still do this. I would make this moment creative. I would practice this moment. I would make this moment really, really intentional because you're going to have guests. And even if there are no guests, everybody else needs to hear you welcome guests to reinforce in their mind, hey, there's supposed to be new people here. Action creates culture. Here's another thing. State your mission. I would say this in the welcome every single time. And I would say something like this. I would say, hey, if this is your first time here today, we're so glad you're here. But the most important thing you need to know about us is our mission. And we're here to, and then you say your mission statement. People spend all this time and money and energy creating these mission statements and never use them. This is where you need to use it. Every single Sunday, I would say it. You say, aren't people going to get tired of hearing it? Yes. They need to hear it every single week. If somebody hears your mission 40 times, maybe they'll know it. But they're not going to know it after the first time or the second time. And so we used to do this. We used to do a welcome in our church via video. And we'd have somebody come out and say, hey, welcome so much. We're so glad you're here. The first thing you need to know about us is our mission. And we're here to lead people from where they are to where God wants them to be. So no matter where you are in life, we're glad you're here today. And we said that sentence every single Sunday. And it reinforced to people why we exist, but also that new people were there, and we wanted to match those things up. This is something you could say every single week. It may get old to you, but people need to hear it over and over again. They need to hear you talk about it. They need to hear you illustrate it. They need to see you point to it when they see it happen. New people need to know what your church is about. So welcome guests and state your mission. Here's some other things to do in your welcome. Limit the announcements. This is not the time to tell people the 5 things they need to know or read to them what is already printed in the handout. Limit the announcements. In fact, I think one of the best practices here is to maybe only have one next step for people during this moment. If you have to have another moment in the church where there's some announcements, that's fine. But don't muddy up this moment with a bunch of announcements. Here's my filter for announcements. This is when I was pastoring in a church and doing this every single week. And now as I coach people, I say, only announce from the stage what applies to almost everybody in the room. If it doesn't apply to 80% of the people in the room, don't make the announcement. If it doesn't apply to 80%, it's the 80% rule. If it doesn't apply to 80% of the room, there's a better way. I've been in church services where there have been announcements made to 200 or 300 people that literally only applied to one person. And I know I've used the word literally, and that is a true use of the word literally. I've heard announcements made from the stage to hundreds of people that were really only intended for one person. Sometimes I hear it for 10 people. But there are better ways to communicate with 1 or 10 people than telling 290 people that what I'm saying is irrelevant to you. That is a terrible thing to reinforce. And then lastly, I would do in the welcome is one next step. If you're new here, most important thing you need to know, kind of tell people what to expect and what's going to happen that day. And then here's one next step. Like if you're new here today, the best next step for you is this. And so here's kind of a pro tip. Is to make this personable and real. This doesn't need to be a scripted, this needs to be a personable, funny thing. Think talk show host. Think when Jimmy Fallon comes out on The Tonight Show and he's just talking with the audience. Does he know what he's going to say? Of course. But is he personable? Yes. You know, one of the ways to do this is you can use volunteers. We used to have a volunteer in our church named Jonathan, and we'd have Jonathan do the welcome as often as possible. And Jonathan was a volunteer. He wasn't on staff. But he was personable, he was funny, he would take that seriously, people liked him, he was engaging, he was a volunteer in our church, and he did the welcome better than I did it, and I'm on staff. Why? Because I believe God uniquely wired him to do those kind of things really well. And there's maybe somebody in your church, it may be another staff member, it may be a volunteer that can come out and do this welcome moment in your church. You could put it on the plan. That Jonathan's going to come out and do the welcome, and it's going to be great because Jonathan's going to take it serious. He's going to practice it. He's going to do the right stuff. He's going to hit the highlights, and that can be his thing. I want to show you an example, though. Here's an example of a friend of mine named Gavin. Gavin is a pastor at Woodstock City Church in Atlanta, and this is a video of Gavin doing the welcome for his people. So let's watch this.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing great. Welcome to our 9 o'clock service at Watermark. If you are here for the very first time, we are glad that you are here. My name is Gavin. I'm the lead pastor here at Watermark Church. Let me tell you a little bit about our church and what we're going to do today, in case you don't know. Our mission at Watermark is just really simple. We want to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. This morning, we'll be together for right about an hour. We're going to get to sing some great songs, and Ryan and Dee Dee are going to lead us in our time of music. If you don't know the words, don't worry. The lyrics will be on the screens, and if you have a really bad singing voice like me, don't worry again, because the music will be loud enough that nobody will leave the building because of you. So feel free to sing as loud as you want. Also, we are closing our series today, Ask It with Andy Stanley. So if you have missed any of the other pieces of this series, as always, we would love for you to go online to watermarkchurch.com/messages, and you can watch any of our previous messages there for free. Also, next week, we're beginning a brand new local series called You're Invited, and I would love to invite you to come back next week for that as well. Hey, there's a lot of great things things going on. We gave you a bulletin when you came in, has some great information in it. Let me just share a couple of those. One, today we are getting ready right now to launch our new small groups called access groups or short-term groups. Short-term groups are very similar to our long-term groups, except they are shorter, right? You guys already knew that. You're so smart. So they're shorter, but they're really topically driven. So if you are not in a small group, we would love for you to consider being a part of one of our short-term small groups. You can learn more online if you go to the website, watermarkchurch.com/short-term groups, and you can read all about the offerings that we're going to have coming up this spring. Would love for you to consider being a part of one of those. Also, a lot of you today parked at our brand new second off-site parking lot at Sixes Elementary. If you see people walk around with a sticker on, tell them thank you for parking at Sixes. You're the reason that I got to have a great parking space at church today. So we are glad that you did that. Isn't it cool that we go to a church where we have to have multiple off-site parking lots? Isn't that awesome? So we're pumped about that. Thank you for parking at our second lot if you did that today. Also, last thing to tell you, today we're going to get to celebrate life change through baptism. We have Adam this morning who's come, and we're going to get to celebrate his story and celebrate baptism with him. We think baptism is a huge step in the life of a believer. It's the way that we publicly identify with Jesus and really his death and burial and resurrection. And so we're going to get to celebrate that today. If you have any questions about baptism, we would love to answer those. You can ask any of our staff members or go online. We have great information there available as well. All right, hey, we are ready to do a little bit of singing, and Ryan and Dee Dee are going to lead us in our time of music. So as they come up, I'd love for you to stand up, find somebody with a parking sticker on, and just tell them thank you for your great parking space today.
All right, so that example of a welcome, I thought Gavin did a good job. He was personable. He kind of told people what to expect. He talked to guests, told people, kind of introduced the people who are going to be leading. Just a good, personable example. There's a good bit of information there. From my personal experience, there was a couple more, an announcement, maybe more that was unique to that day. So they had to pack a couple of extra things into it. But a really, really, really good experience and a really, really good example of a welcome. And I know for a fact that Gavin and the team at Woodstock City, they really value that moment in their service, that they practice it, they evaluate it, and they make it better because it is one of the most important moments to connect with guests, to say, hey, everything that I'm going to experience today is kind of designed for me. And so that's a huge opportunity. So third thing, so we've got the handout, great opportunity to connect with guests. Welcome, one of the most important public moments to connect with guests. And then the third thing, and not every church does this, but I really want to kind of make a case for it today and then maybe give you some insight on how to tweak it, is to use a connection card. A connection card, a communication card, a welcome card, whatever you want to call it, but some type of card where people who are guests can fill out and share their information as much or as little as they want and share it with the church. And the reason I think this is so important is because you can't follow up with people who you don't know. So there is an appropriate way to ask for information. You can't follow up. You can't really put a follow-up plan in place, which is what we're going to talk about in the third video. You can't put a follow-up plan in place if you don't have some kind of information from people. And so I want to encourage you to ask people for information. On a good communication card, you ask people to provide their information. But the second thing is you only ask for important information. Only ask for important information. And this is kind of a general principle, is the more fields you add to a form, the less people complete the form. So if you have a 3-question form, you'll get a certain number of responses. But if you ask 7 questions, you're going to get less responses. If you ask 10 questions, you're going to get less response. The more questions you ask, the more boxes you give people to check, the less responses you're going to get. So on your connection card, I really want to advocate that you ask for only the most important information that you need. Now, I have a personal preference on this. My personal preference is to ask for first name, email address, and best phone number. And that's really all I need, because I can put a follow-up plan into place with those 3 things, and maybe even only 2 of the 3, but those 3 things, I can put a follow-up plan in place, and I can get more information later as the relationship progresses. Think about this like dating, right? You're not going to go on a first date with somebody and give them a long form to fill out so you can know everything about their life. You're going to learn the most important stuff first. And if the relationship goes to the next step, you can learn more stuff. If it goes to the next step, you learn more stuff. If you get married, you learn more stuff, right? So the amount of information you ask for needs to be tied or appropriate to the level of the relationship. And so only ask for important information. Now, I get asked this question all the time. It's like, hey, we have a communication card, we have a welcome card, but no one fills it out. How do we get people to fill it out? And that's why I like to suggest this, is to offer a gift. Is to offer a gift. And we found, and a lot of churches that we work with do this similar thing, is that when you offer people a gift, a gift to first-time guests, then they're more likely to give you the card. So you could say something like this, like, hey, if you're a guest today, there's a little card in the handout, just some simple information on there. Fill out as much or as little as you like. We want you to be comfortable. Just fill out as much or as little as you like. That was a sentence that we used to say all the time because it kind of took the pressure off. And if you take that card, you can do two things with it. You can drop it in the offering buckets when it comes around, or if you take it out to the Welcome Center, we've got a gift for you, and I'd hold up the gift. And every Sunday, we would have somebody go out to the Welcome Center and say, hey, I'd love to give that gift. And so there are a lot of gifts that you can give people. You can give people a free T-shirt. Venue Church, I love this church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Pastor Tavner is the pastor there. They like own the T-shirt market in Tennessee. In Chattanooga, because they give out T-shirts like it's nobody's business. And they offer a gift. They offer a T-shirt to all first-time guests. But then also, I love this. This is so good. They also give the T-shirt if you bring a guest. So there's such an incentive for somebody who brings a bringer, right? A bringer comes and they go to this area and they say, I brought a guest. The guest gets a T-shirt. The bringer gets a T-shirt, and it's an incentive, right? It's an incentive to figure out who the guest is. It's an incentive to remind people to bring guests. And they've got Chattanooga covered with Venue Church T-shirts. In fact, I bet if you just go to Chattanooga and visit, or if you're from Chattanooga and you walk around, you're going to see somebody wearing a Venue Church T-shirt because they give them out all the time. They spend money on it. They invest in it, and it has paid off. It is a key part of their strategy. And so they offer a gift to first-time guests that is a T-shirt. And so you could do a T-shirt, and they do different styles all the time. They get hundreds of them, give them out, get hundreds more, give them out. I mean, you could do that. You could do a coffee mug or a water bottle. I've seen that. Some churches have some really cool water bottles these days. You could do a gift bag. We used to do a thing called we used to do this gift tube, and I included the specs for it and how we did it on the page, and so it's a resource for you. But we used to do this gift tube, a mailing tube, a cardboard tube that was about 12 inches long, 4 inches wide. And we would stuff it, and so it was a mailing tube, like you could mail a poster, but it was like short and fat. And so we would put stuff in there, and we'd wrap a label on it, and I would hold that up when doing the welcome, say, hey, we've got this gift for you. And there was like this mystery element to it because it was a gift for guests, but they didn't really know what it was. It just kind of looked cool. And so many people would go and get that, and we'd just make them up, batch them up 50 at a time, stock them at our welcome center. People would come by and get it, and it would provide a place for us to get that card, to get that information from people, but also have a conversation. And then because we had information, we could put the follow-up process in place. So here are a few examples of communication cards. So we're talking about cards. Let me just kind of walk you through some communication cards. Here's a good one. I like this card. Connection card. If you're here for the first time, you're our VIP. And they say, drop this in the offering boxes as they pass. And so it's just a simple card. I like this. Couple colors, good contrast on this card, but also provides place for people to follow up at the end of the service where they can update their information. And you may choose to highlight different things on different days with this card. So that's a good example. Here's another one, another connection card. Just simple, just a simple connection card, a place to follow up with people. I like that card. And I like this, where it says best phone number. I like that language, best phone number, because sometimes people provide their home number, sometimes they provide their cell number, but I let them decide. I don't need 4 numbers in our system for somebody. I don't need their home number, work number, and cell phone number, just their best phone number. Here's some other cards. I like the contrast on these. Here's one, first timer. We're glad you're here. That is very clear. Tells me that if I'm new, I need to fill out that card. And this particular church had a second card that was a follow-up card. I've decided. And this was like if you made a decision in the service or you want to be baptized, you want to follow Jesus. 2 different cards. Same layout. Just really all they've changed was some words and some colors. Love that. Love that card. And you can make something like that. Here's another one, a connect card. This one's kind of longer. This could be added on as a perforated thing to a bulletin. But again, the boxes, the contrast. I like this one where they're getting the prayer request, giving people a place to share something. Here's one from Jubilee Church. This is a little more substantial, and it's kind of built in, branded together with their handout. with their kind of next steps, contact information, place to take notes, and a place to fill out a card. Here's one that is from Relevant Church, gorelevant.com, good church. And I like the contrast on this. Lots of information that they're asking, but this card, it welcomes people, but it gives them a place to kind of respond. Here's another one. I wanted to share this one with you. I took the church name off because here's where I believe this church is asking for information that I don't know what they're going to need to know with it. I don't know what they're going to need to do with it. So maybe on your card you're going, do we really need to know that? Is that something we really need to know? We should look at it. But I like this, guest of. Guest of, and they can write in who they're a guest of. And so maybe if somebody wrote, I'm the guest of Jimmy Smith, I could send a thank you note to Jimmy Smith and say, hey, Jimmy, thanks so much for bringing a guest. But here is a template. So we want to create a template for you. And so here is a template that you can, this is an InDesign file. So you can customize this. You can tweak this. You can change it up. You can use it as is. You can mix it up. But it's a template for you. And one of the things you can do is you can download this, you can make one, you can tweak one, and you can use it for yourself. Now, one thing that we've got is we've got a Facebook group where you can go and you can, if you want feedback on your card, because this is important to get right. If you want feedback on your welcome, if you want feedback on your connection card or your connect card, if you want any type of feedback, go into the Facebook group. You can join the Facebook group. It is only Church Fuel members, only Church Fuel family is in the Facebook group, and you can post this and get feedback. And there's pastors from all over the country who will give you honest feedback. Tell you what they like, what they don't like, what you should change. There's some great community happening on the Facebook group. So you could post your welcome, a video. You could post your connection card. You can share your website, your I'm New page, anything that we've talked about so far on Following Up with Guests. Go post it in the Facebook group, and let's make each other better. That's part of this. Is what you're doing is unique. So let's make each other better in the Facebook group. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the follow-up process itself. What can you do to follow up with guests who visit your church?